a start to these things. We'll see how it goes here. I'm gonna, oh, yeah, I'm live over on YouTube already, which is a great sign. And I should be going live here on YouTube in about 30 seconds. So stand by. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Go live. Excellent. Dylan, you're my good luck charm.
I, that's the first time anyone's ever said that to me.
All right, well, let's get rolling. This is the Minvo Procast. I am your host, Mark Ronick, and here with me today, my guest, Dylan Schmidt. I've known Dylan, I think we started connecting around 2020. I think also, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like the two of us were coming up on social media right around the same time. And so I've kind of watched you grow. I think you've probably watched me grow some. And through the years, we started connecting and actually talking to one another and have built a nice friendship within this industry together. We are in a semi-weekly mastermind with a lot of podcast professionals. I've been on his show. Dylan, is this the first time I'm interviewing you?
I think so.
I think so. It might
maybe.
be. Yeah. Yeah. So Dylan is a content creator. He has a podcast. He is on TikTok and all the social media platforms, really. I guess I was thinking TikTok because I feel like that's where you have maybe the most engagement, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. And you probably have around, I feel like you're pushing close to around 20,000 over on TikTok. Is that right?
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So Dylan, the digital creator, and that's also his website, right? It's just digital creator, or is it dylanschmidt.com? Either one works, right?
dylanschmidt.com.
Okay, Dylan Schmidt, and that's SCHMIDT. So Dylan, welcome to the Minvo Procast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mark. This feels like familiar and new at the same time.
Yes, and I've probably thrown you off because of my background. Usually I'm in my home studio, but as you may have heard, I had to temporarily leave Asheville because of the flooding and all that stuff. Planning on going back, but for now I'm in my parents' study, office, whatever you want to call it. So I'm at my parents' house. What can I tell you?
Glad you are safe, and we're going to be spending some time together, and I'm going to be so curious behind what's door number 1, 2,
yeah, I know. I was thinking there are so many doors behind me. But you can see I just added my little on-air sign behind me. I was trying to get a little feel of home, but I have a little more to do, I think, here. I'll have to show you my little mock setup here that I have going on. I'm literally on a poker table. I've got and I'm facing a lot of windows for that natural light, right? I've got my iPhone as a camera over here. I've got my Rodecaster on the side here. I'm figuring it out. I'm making it work as best I can.
You're figuring it out best you can is better than most people's permanent setup. So
thank you. I appreciate that. And this is about you. So let me kick things off with you. There's a few things I don't know about you, so I want to get into those too. First, though, as I mentioned, I've been following you on social media for a while now, and initially, a lot of the stuff you were doing, and you are great about providing a variety of content. And one of the things I often noticed about your content, there were a lot of tips and tricks, whether it was around podcasting, around social media strategy, etc. And lately, I feel like you've shifted a little. And I'm not saying that you aren't providing any more insights or tips on social media or content creation, but it feels like now you've started your focus on different things like interesting facts or historical information in the world of podcasting, TV, radio. These are just some things coming to mind, and it seems like a shift. So what inspired it, if I'm correct, and how has it been resonating with your audience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I feel like I'm a bit of a sponge, right? And I've been putting out a lot of content, and I guess maybe I started the whole like creating content as kind of a reaction or a response to a podcast producer that I had worked with that was kind of gatekeeping
Mm.
a lot of things, and I just didn't feel that that was right. So I kind of like started creating content from this place of I want to get as much information out there and tips and helpful tidbits and things like that. And then it just kept evolving to n- I'm I've talked about how to start a podcast like, so many times. Just my own desire of like wanting to evolve from just the basics. But then the reason why I say I feel like a sponge too is because I watch a lot of videos on YouTube that are like historical videos where they cover why something came to be. I love videos like that. And so I wanted to experiment and create some videos like that. And so I found myself, I guess, just making a few videos like that because I'd be sitting on the couch at night and then I'd ask myself a question and then I'd go to ChatGPT or Google and then it would tell me and I'd be like, what if I just made that a video? Because if I'm curious about that, probably somebody else is. So I did that actually one night and then it took off on TikTok and coincidentally enough did not take off on Instagram. It was like the opposite. It just like
Oh yeah.
not a good
That
response at
happens
all.
all the time. One
Right.
of them it takes off, the other it's just a complete bomb. Yeah.
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 It was like, all right, thank you, TikTok. And I don't understand how that did not get any traction. It got
Right.
negative traction on Instagram. Um, but I took that cue from TikTok and was just like, maybe I should make more of these, sparked by the ideas that I have randomly that I can't necessarily pinpoint where they come from because it was literally just on the couch. I was like, why do radio stations have that weird, you're listening to
Yeah.
102.7, and I'm like, why do they have that? And so I like Google that and I'm like, let me make a video. And I was like, oh, it's related to the Titanic.
Oh, I
And
saw that video. That's right.
yeah, I'm like, that's so strange. And if I find that so strange, I need to share that with somebody. And my wife is probably like, yeah, okay, that's cool. But I'm like, there's got to be more people out there that think that's cool. And sure enough, so it kind of just stems from that. I try to sprinkle in still some tips and things like that. And I think I do at least once a week. I make it an aim to incorporate one of those videos. But and tell me if you feel a similar way as you start like having increased the quantity of the content you output. It becomes like this necessary introspective process of like, do I keep saying the same thing? It's a skill to say, and I don't think it's right or wrong. I think, however you want to approach it, but it's a skill to say the same thing
Yeah.
3,000 times. Like, but sometimes I don't know that I'm the best at that. So I guess maybe wanting to evolve, boredom, and just pushing myself to like new areas. Do you find yourself also feeling like you want to evolve with your content, or do you feel it like, do you just try to, how do you look at it?
Yeah, I try to. I try to, but the thing is that for me, my personal challenge is once I get into a certain rhythm with the content that I'm creating, I have a hard time steering away from it, right? Because I just get comfortable with that, and I start perfecting it, so I get better and better at it, and I get that dopamine rush of seeing it grow and I don't want to say evolve, but just improve. But then that ends up also getting frustrating because I then it's a psychological game. I get in my head and I get afraid to steer away because I see something working and I don't want to yeah, I want to stay riding that wave. I don't want to fall off and then never be able to get back on it again. So that's just my personal struggle that I still deal with to this day.
Yeah, and it's funny because like I kind of think about creating content in a similar way of music, especially these days. Because with music, it's like you put out a single, and what do people want? Another single. They don't
Mhm.
want just like you made one song and we're happy with one song. Everybody wants the follow up to that song once they're like kind of played it out, and then they're like, can this person make another song like that song? And then they either want like the same song in different shoes or a whole new song that like blew the paradigm away like that other song did. And I feel like with content too, it is a similar thing of you put it out there and then you're like, do I top that? Do I make the same thing or do I go in a new direction?
Yeah.
Like I feel like that's like the main three choices uh, when you look really close at it. And I feel a similar thing too, where, I'm like, I get in a groove, and it's been lately with like a little bit more storytelling and how do I, find these interesting stories that come to me on the couch randomly. So I try to put myself in those positions, but that's like not a process really because I'm like in the shower or I'm driving or I'm walking my
Mm-hmm.
dog and I'm like, oh, that's an idea. I should write that down. But that's also very, if it sparks any anxiousness in me because then I want to be ready to, I want to have all the ideas. I
Yeah.
want to be able to create on demand. And I figured out ways to like kind of do certain things so I don't limit myself to just one style. But yeah, it is like I created a week or two ago, I created like 16 videos and I think it was like 30 minutes or something. And these weren't like storytelling ones. These were just like tips. And I'm like, these are great. I should be happy with these. And then of course the next day I'm like, I don't know that I want to use these for the short form videos. Maybe they make great tweets later on. Maybe they are something else, but I don't know. Like I want to make something new. It's like
Yeah. I want to
at the
ask you
same,
about that actually.
yeah,
And because you said two things just now. You said you found some ways to kind of, I don't know, maybe it was something around giving yourself permission to experiment. And you mentioned earlier that you do experiment a lot. And I know for me, I know for a lot of content creators, that's a challenge. Like I explained to you my challenge. So, what is it? How do you experiment and still put out the content that you're confident in, proud of, etc.?
yeah. Well, I definitely don't pay much attention to the metrics of how something is like successful or not. If it got a lot of views because I post to the different platforms,
Yeah.
they don't seem to really take off in unison. Um, it's always like one platform is ahead and then the other ones just like drop it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't look at, oh, this did great on a certain platform. I kind of like follow my own energy towards it of like, is this something that I want to put out there because I'm doing a high volume? And if it's a drag to put out, I'm like, that's not going to translate well. Like, I can't maintain my output volume if it's a drag, like energetically. Like, I got to sludge through this whole process. So, to me, I look at how fast is it moving forward and how much am I wanting to put into it as an indicator of like, this is the right direction. Like, I did 16 videos, say, in 30 minutes, and that's not a drag at all, right? That's like a lot of videos.
Yeah.
And then I found when it came to like editing them and publishing them, it was a little bit of a drag. So I was like, okay, I'll come back to those. Let me like follow the the openings that I have. And I look at it like there's a menu of options when it comes to how I approach specifically short form videos of like there's different formats, right? Like there's different ways of approaching the video even if the video is just me talking to the camera within that video there's like it could be a tip, it could be a story, it could be something that's like super off the wall because I have these polls sometimes to make these videos that are like the laugh track or the clap track
Mm-hmm.
laugh track
Applause track.
yeah
Yeah.
yeah now I'm like, wait, was it the laugh? And that's also like the memory of like making so many videos. I'm like, wait, what did I
Mm-hmm.
say? um And so, yeah, so having like these different kind of variables I can play with while still having a box for the video is really helpful for me to like, okay, which from this menu am I choosing? Which from this dopamine menu am I
Mm-hmm.
going to choose?
How many videos, how many short form videos do you think you've made?
I
And when did you start? Was it around 2020?
It was right in 2021,
Okay.
um, June 2021. It's always sitting on the couch coming up with an idea. That's where it started. Um, I think honestly, I think it's been around like 1,400 plus videos. Um, so I
Wow.
do like a lot of volume, and I've refined certain things, but still I find like a menu is helpful because it's you also get a lot of options when you've
Yeah.
been doing it. it a bunch, you know?
You once told me that you have some, I'll call them dummy accounts, but
Yeah.
really I think that they're more like, the way I understand them or interpret it is it's your playground. It's for you to do that experimenting. And I'm curious, are you still doing that? And if you could share a little bit more about what that's like and what you're doing
Yeah.
exactly.
I started calling them shadow accounts because
I like
I
that.
don't know what else to call them. Like,
Sounds much sexier than
I
dummy.
know, right? Shadow account.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so I created these shadow accounts where like I would just post content to test because these days the algorithms don't only publish your content to followers. Most who view your content these days are like non-followers, which is awesome. It
Yeah.
was so much harder when it was just your followers. So I can really get a gauge on like if content is, just trying new stuff, not feel like I'm weighed down by like I have to stay in my niche. And so I don't post on there as much as I'd like on these different accounts. And that's only because of time lately and because I've branched out a little bit more on my main account. I've been able to, yeah, just kind of see what happens. Like, what if I post something that's not strictly within this way of doing things? And the feedback of not sticking just to one way of doing things has been great. Like, people will tell me, um, Lloyd, Lloyd was like, my wife watches all your videos, and I was like, whoa, because she's not, as far as I know, like really into podcasting, and so for him to say that, I was like, that's really cool. And other people that have no interest in the things I talk about say that they watch my videos, and I was like, that's cool. And so to me, I'm like, well, I'll keep making them then because I don't want to let them down, and like keep providing like interesting stories and things like that while weaving in some educational aspects of it. But I do have the shadow accounts, but because they don't drive revenue or clients, then I'm not as incentivized to post on them. And
Mm.
so, in my head, I'm like, yes, I would make a Dodgers shadow account and I'd actually just post on it regularly and it would become a main account. And somehow it'd become this like Dodgers influencer just as a side hustle. This stuff takes so much time, like
Yeah.
if I had another 6 hours in the day, maybe, and didn't need more like sleep or something.
You mentioned something too just now about if it's getting you business or
Yeah.
not, right? So you've you've kind of broadened from this smaller niche of just trying to talk to mainly podcasters and maybe content creators to now it feels to me like a much more broad audience. So is that shift helping you? Are you getting more business out of it? Let me start there.
You know what? Like, my mantra lately has been like ask better questions to get better results and answers personally, internally. And now, like, when I'm working with people, like, sometimes I'm like, that's just a great question because that's the question that like should be asked, right? If you're putting this energy and time into things and you do want a business result, like more clients, more business, then that is like, it seems almost simple and like quote unquote obvious to like wonder, but so many people wouldn't ask that. They just chase after the views or something, and they're
Yeah.
like, So I just wanted to like highlight that that is a fantastic question because
Thank you.
it is what I would wonder too, and I did wonder in the very beginning. um, so it's not like crazy numbers, right? These are not videos that are getting millions of views. These are getting thousands of views. Some are getting 60,000. Some are getting 500. Some are
Mhm.
getting 10,000, whatever. Um, and at first, it did not seem like it, but how I view it as kind of going back to the energy part of it. So I have this like energy I want to put into the videos, and that kind of drives it because if I'm like I'm only making videos in this one way, it feels, I don't know, just like it doesn't feed my soul as much.
Mhm.
So these videos that are kind of a little bit off the wall and just like a little bit outside of the niche, kind of targeted towards just getting clients, they they light me up. And then it kind of gives me more space because I don't feel like I'm only making these like um I don't know, like business oriented videos, where I still like those. I've just made 1,000 of them, So it's it's helped me evolve, and maybe that'll change in the future. But right now, I do notice that it drives. clients,
Mhm.
but um, also it feels like it keeps people around a little bit longer too, because people that maybe have no interest in starting a podcast or working with me, they might just stick around because they watched a video that is directionally related to the thing that they're interested in. And that's cool because for me, I know like I'll get content blindness where I see somebody only talk about like one thing.
Yeah.
And so it's not that I'm not interested, it's just that right now I'm kind of checked out on social media and I just want to like scroll or something. And I'm just looking for like a story or something. So I throw in these, videos, not like it's not like a dark arts magic of like, work with me subliminally played backwards throughout the back
Right.
video or something. But I'll talk about something that like you would only be interested in that if you were like, if you knew what you were like, oh yeah, I'm interested in like podcasting or something. You know what I mean? Like this is pretty specific. And that doesn't take away from the other videos because the algorithm shows what people will watch. So I just kind of lean on the algorithm to put it in the right place. And it seems I'm busier. I don't get so far into the weeds of like pulling the data of every platform and then like piecing together like I don't at this stage, but I know that my numbers are going up like financially. So that's what I'm focused on.
Okay.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
but I definitely know it's like, I'm like, all my indicators are going in the right direction. And I do
Okay.
pull some data, but not like, oh yeah, like TikTok, I'm seeing like a 430% increase. Like I could do that. It does not helping me because I just know that it's increasing. So I'm like,
Mhm.
let's go.
Yeah.
Um,
I forgot to ask you a question about the shadow accounts. One was well, has any of these accounts, how many do you have? And have any of them ended up blowing up into its own thing where you're like, now this isn't a shadow account anymore. Like now this like actually has legs that it could be its own thing.
yeah, I think there has been like maybe like 6 accounts, maybe. Um, Not less than that, but maybe a little bit more.
Hmm.
And there was one account that was, and I think I told you about it before, it was like a news account where I would post the news, and
Oh yeah.
that took off. And then I it was just a 90-day experiment, and that one was less of a post occasionally. It was more of like I'm going to post Monday through Friday, and that took off, and people were really looking forward to it. And then I think it was around the time when my wife and I had our daughter that it was like, there's no way I can't. I'm
Hmm.
I'm going to bed when this is supposed to be posted,
Yeah.
So that one took off, and I think I deactivated the account or something, but it had gotten thousands and thousands of followers and had like a following.
Cool. Well, I want to ask you, I want to get back to some social media stuff, but I also want to get to know you a little bit more. And I want to take a second to remind anybody here watching live. Hopefully, you have registered via LinkedIn, because if you did, at the end of this, I will be spinning a wheel. And if it lands on your name, you win a lifetime subscription to Minvo. So stick around for that. But Dylan, I saw you posted, first of all, I applaud you for sticking with threads, right? That's Instagram's answer to X. And I love threads. I got really into it when it came out, and I'm trying to get back into it more, but I love the way that you're using it. You're randomly posting, you're not always posting about the content that you talk about, like podcasting and social media. And there was one that I saw, I have it written down here, that I want to ask you about. You posted, I think this was just last week. I graduated high school without knowing the order of the months.
Is this a quiz? I'm afraid of this now.
No,
Where's this going?
I'm
I was
not gonna
kidding.
quiz you. I'm not gonna quiz you.
I can do it
Today.
now, Mark.
So, all right, Dylan says, I graduated high school without knowing the order of months. Today, I run a business that works with some of the most innovative thinkers. So, can you share more about that? Because that's definitely something I didn't know about you, and how overcoming it you know, maybe overcoming that or whatever those different, I'm going to call them learning challenges are, how that shaped your perspective as a business owner.
Yeah. So I didn't know when people learn the order of months until like a couple weeks ago because I was curious with my daughter. My daughter's turning 2 soon, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like, she's not speaking sentences yet or anything, but I
Right.
was curious. I was just like, when do kids learn? I asked my wife, and she's like, I think that's like kindergarten or first grade or something. I was like, really? Because I remember distinctively like telling my dad like I don't know the order of months in like high school, and he's like, what? I can't believe that. And even afterwards, and my birthday's
Do
in
you ever
June.
remember learning it, like
No,
initially as a kid? You just don't even have a memory of like sitting down with a teacher and class and them going over that. Okay.
zero. Yeah, zero.
Okay. Okay.
And I think about like, okay, there was probably months on the wall or something, but also some classrooms. I mean, maybe it was the 90s, but like overstimulating too. There were probably there's probably stuff all over these
Yeah.
classrooms.
Yeah.
So it's not like it was like just the months.
Yeah.
Um, and so my birthday's in June. Obviously, Christmas in December and January. I would know the dates like around my birthday, so I knew May, June, July, August, and then December, January, and like that was that,
Yeah.
and the rest were just blurry. I was like, I don't know if it was March and then February or February then March, and then especially around like November before October, and so yeah, I didn't, but I learned the months. I'm not saying a couple weeks ago I learned the months. I learned the months. uh, Honestly, I think I was probably like early 20s or something, um, and I'm 35 now. Uh, yeah, well, I forget where.
Well, really, the question is to tell me about that which you have,
Yeah.
and does that is do you have is learning challenges, is that a thing for you growing up, and
Oh yeah.
how does that translate now, because you made that comparison here saying, today I run a business that works with some of the most innovative thinkers. How have those challenges shaped you as a business owner now?
Yeah, so I just learned something actually last weekend. I was visiting with the old neighbor. We
Hmm.
drove by our old neighborhood and we stopped by and we're talking to her, and she, I believe, got her master's. She works in assessing learning uh, disabilities. I think it is
Okay.
like
Hmm.
assessing students to figure out their learning
Sure.
disabilities. I believe something like that. And as she was like sharing about how she does these assessments, which are like super thorough, I was like identifying myself and like, oh, that's probably why I didn't know. So there's like not just one type of um, ways of under like having a learning disability, and that is for me was probably like an emotional traumatic event because when I was 3, my brother died, and then shortly after my parents got divorced, and then every couple of years someone would die, and then my mom died, and so I think probably in my early formative years there was so much probably going on at home that like the focus wasn't really on like learning of school in a
Sure.
lot of ways.
Sure.
There's definitely a lot of emotional skills I learned during those times, and it wasn't like I wasn't learning anything during those times, but when it came to like school, it was like, why does this matter? Because people are dying. This is not that important. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Relative to, it is important, but it's relative to what's going on like in
In
my
your
personal
life
life.
at that time. Yeah.
Yeah. So now I can kind of like, oh, that's probably why, because I'm probably just, I'd find myself, if I think back in school, just kind of checked out a little bit. Um, and now I think about, how I've evolved in a completely, obviously different person, I'd hope, than when I was in kindergarten. but, but a little taller.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and, and yeah, so, I've done a lot of work on myself, a lot of meditation, a lot of journaling, a lot of both of those probably. And not intentionally, but I've probably rewired my brain in a lot of ways.
Mm.
And I think if I did have like a learning disability, when it comes to around the emotional part of things, I would imagine like a lot of therapy and meditation and journaling worked me through those. So now, like, I have such a appetite for learning that when it comes to business and when it comes to the people I work with, it doesn't matter if the person I'm speaking with is one of the most well-renowned experts at something. Like there's it feels not like a even playing field on their topic or anything like that, but I definitely feel like this desire to learn. I don't feel inferior or anything, but if it was younger Dylan, it might have been that because I had trouble just learning myself. And I feel like just having a desire to want to learn,
Yeah.
you know? And I
Yeah.
work with, like you mentioned, like, or like I mentioned in the thread post, like, I work with a lot of experts. Like, I don't know, I should figure out the exact numbers, but I would bet like, you know, 90% of our clients with content clips have given a TED talk. And I would bet like 70% have a bachelor's degree and 50% have a master's. Like there's like this educational graph that I just have noticed with our clients having certain things in common. And we don't ask them like, have you ever given a TED talk? It just happens to be that way. And they happen to be some fantastic experts at their field. And I am able to pick up on nuances in their teachings and things just because I'm super curious, you know,
Hmm.
um, and and that maybe was there before, but it was pretty like limited in scope. And as I've done the therapy, the meditation, the journaling, it's just allowed me to increase my scope of interest and become deeply interested in and being able to take on more, you know, take on
Yeah.
more of the problems associated with business because it's never ending problems, you know. And when you're like emotionally full, which is a normal thing to be uh, in life, life is hard, you know, but to be able to continue on despite that and like continue growing and continue just taking on more, it makes business, I wouldn't say easier, but it makes it more possible.
Fair enough. And thank you for sharing all of that. And yeah, I didn't know a lot about your younger years. And, it feels almost awkward to say, but I do want to say, I'm sorry for your losses. And that's a whole other show, I think, as far as getting into that. But thank you for sharing that. And you know, I appreciate the meditation thing. I'm big into meditation and mindfulness and personal growth. And I gotta say, like from what I know of you, from this interview in particular too, I feel like Dylan's a guy who really has his S together, right? But I know we all have things, and I'm curious what yours is. What's a big challenge right now as a content creator specifically that you're dealing with that you haven't gotten all the answers to yet that you're still trying to work through?
Yeah. I think, mm,
Nothing.
yeah,
He's perfect.
no, no, definitely not. Definitely not. No. I mean, I think it's tough. It, like nothing like fire like comes to mind. That, but if I had to like choose something, for sure, it's probably, I don't know, maybe outsourcing my own, not outsourcing, but like definitely probably getting help more
Mm,
so with my own stuff that I'm working on.
yeah.
It's funny because I used to like in 2012, 13, I would write a weekly newsletter called Stay on Target. And what I would do is I would just like write like a first draft, send it to an editor. The editor would fix it up, send it back, and then I'd publish it. And now it's kind of like probably what you would do with the chat GPT. um,
Hmm.
but it was a great way to work, and just that extra help really just helped push things along. So I'm good at getting help for other people's work, you know, like
Yeah.
editors and content clips. Like that's what we do. Like I can get help. But when it comes to my own stuff, I'm like, I'll do it. And it's just funny because I bet the more I step into getting help for my own stuff, the more I'll be able to help more people, you know,
Right.
and that's not the most fun to admit because you're like, then just do it. But it comes to like even like my own podcast cover art, I'm like, I need to do it like this. I'm like, why am I doing it? Like, I can just pay somebody to do it. That's their job. I would think the same thing. Like, I don't need to be a designer. And nowadays, too, when people ask me certain things and I'm like, oh, I can do that, I'm like, why am I doing that? Like, that's not even my, I just, and maybe it's a people pleasing. I don't know. I just I want to accept more help so that I can help more people, but also let people who are good at what they're doing do more of it too, like a designer in their specific skill sets, and really respecting that, and letting them do it. Just um, like with you, Mark, like uh, if if I was looking to start a podcast and it was like, well, I could figure out everything on my own. If I had the budget for it, I would be like, and if I wasn't who I am, I'd be like, just go to Mark, like
Right,
go to
right.
Mark. Like, don't don't try to muscle through this. Like, don't try to be the expert on it. Let someone else who's already put in the thousands and thousands of hours on it shorten everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that answer. And I'm trying to decide which direction I want to go with this. So here's what I'll do. We talked about this interview this morning on my other show, the Podcasting Morning Chat, and I talked about how you were joining us today. And Nick Nallback, who's a part of this show from time to time and also makes a lot of Minvo content too. He said, Mark, you have to ask Dylan. Let me see what I wrote here. He said, you have to ask Dylan about how he's able to spit out high quality short form content so quickly and frequently. And I am so on board with that question because, and he and I have literally had conversations about you that you're not aware of, where, you've put out this piece of content that was like basically breaking news within our industry. And it's one of those things where, like, I see the headline, I'm like, I'm definitely going to make a piece of content about that today. And the next thing I know, I'm scrolling and there's Dylan talking about that very thing already. So we're all curious, how is it that you get things done so quickly? And again, it's not that Dylan's just spitting out stuff left and right. He's also doing it in a really high quality way. The content is really good. It's tells a story. It's high quality video, audio, etc. So Dylan, how do you do it?
Thank you. Thank you
Yeah,
for mentioning that.
you're welcome.
So I approach, well, I'll say this is like hopefully clear as I can. I start my day usually around 9 a.m. and I'm like at my desk. And then I set my Pomodoro timer for 55 minutes on, 10 minutes off. And the 10 minutes off, I take a break. And I pretty much just like repeat that cycle until uh, 5 o'clock, 4:30 ish, and that's it. And I'll take like a lunch break, and if I have to run some errands, it's not like a perfect system.
Sure.
There's flexibility, but if I also have like expectations, right? Like I have to deliver certain things. If I see something, I just record it, and I feel like everything's very systematized. I don't emotionally get tied to anything, but I'm just like, oh, this is probably something I should do. I think we both have ADD, ADHD.
Yep.
I don't know the difference.
Yep.
Um,
No, the H is hyper, and that, by the way, the hyper doesn't necessarily mean like you're the type that bounces off the walls. It could also mean you're hyper fixated,
oh,
right? Like there are some, and I get that way sometimes making content. Like I'll
yeah.
just get into that zone and will forget and everything else around me, my commitments, everything. I'm just so locked in.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I've gotten that way too. And so I'll find like, oh, if there's a news thing, I'm not like, I need to get this out right now. I'm just like, should just probably record this right now and just finish it real quick. So I've systematized my day, and then within that, I try to um, schedule things, but then also offer leeway. Like, okay, this could be just right here, and I'll just do this video before I forget, because I'll
Mm,
forget. That's really why. And I would do more, but for some reason, I don't feel like there's personally, I feel like there's not been a benefit of doing more. So like I'm doing less on Instagram,
mhm.
but that also comes with like the drawback of like forgetting to post sometimes, because I'll post more on TikTok, for example, or YouTube Shorts. I go, oh yeah, I got to keep posting on Instagram, but less, because it seems like less is better over there for me. Um, and so, yeah, so I just try to do it before I forget, but I don't necessarily think about the quality because it's improved with all of my quantity, I guess. So, you know, just it's like whatever's available, you know? And sometimes that I was also like, yeah, I wish I could just use my phone, but it's easier for me to record how it looks right now than it is for me to like record my phone and then airdrop it and then do all that stuff. So I just do it. I set up the system, the process to capture things in a way that make it streamlined and as simple and as efficient as possible. And part of that comes, that's every process of it. So if there was like a new announcement from Rode, it's like, oh, okay, like what is it? And then you just like start typing it out. I know it's going to be around 120 words. I'm like, I know that it'll follow certain kind of beats, and then I just record it and um and then publish it before I forget.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me about that. Where did you come up with 120 words? And tell me a little bit more about that whole, it happens with certain beats.
Yeah, so part of the like the systematizing or streamlining my own creativity is figuring out like the containers for the creativity to exist, right? So I'm like, okay, this is gonna be a short form video. So that's container number one.
Hmm.
Container number two is I ideally want it like 30 seconds, but sometimes like it's just not enough words like that you can fit in 30 seconds. So I looked up, I believe I just looked this up again because it's been a little while, but I think the average human says like 2.5 words a second.
Hmm.
Depends on speeds and whatnot.
Sure.
So I think it came to around 120 words, seemed to be the sweet spot. And then I could shift some words around when I'm actually saying it on camera. But I try to aim for that so that I have enough to work with so it doesn't feel too short, doesn't also feel super long. Um, and then as far as like the beats of it, it's really like the hook or like what creates some type of open loop, some context. The first sentence has to set the context as quick as possible because to me that is just a thing of respect. I don't, people talk about hook, like you need to hook the viewer, all this. To me, it's just like respect. Like I need to know very quickly if this video is for you or not for you. I don't want it to be for everybody because that's impossible. It's
Hmm.
not pizza, can't be for
Hmm.
everybody. Um, so has to hook, but also context and set like what the heck is this video about? And then from there, it's really just delivering the information in a way that is clear, concise, and informing them as much as possible given the 120 uh, word limit because that comes with the sacrifice of information.
Mm.
Me saying
Yeah.
this answer was too long for that. So there's going to be sacrifices and there's going to have to be context missing in the
Hmm.
full overall answer. I can't maybe give my, like Rode announced, that Rode video or whatever, Videocaster. It wasn't, I had no, I didn't want to give my opinion on it because it was brand new. I don't know. So like, let's just remove my opinion on it. I don't know. I don't even think I'm the demographic for it. Um, the price is important. What it features is
Yeah.
important. The fact it's like brand new is important and shiny and like, ooh, that's cool. That's important to me. But outside of like those things, I'm like, let's just remove it because that's just fluff.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
opinion pieces, I save that for like a longer format, and I try to make them as dense as possible using simple language as I can.
Tell me a little bit about how you have, I'll say perfected, although I know we are all always fine tuning, but how have you gotten as good as you've gotten with creating hooks? That's an area that I still struggle with. I feel like, oh, this is good. This will get it out there. But then I watch the statistics and I see, oh yeah, everybody dropped off after a second. They didn't even get through the whole hook, right? So what's the formula? I know you can't. I know you can't go to Chat GPT and just say write me a good hook because it writes terrible hooks with
Yeah.
just that kind of context. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm curious. How do you really come up with those hooks that you know people are gonna know whether or not they should keep watching?
Yeah. Um, yeah. There's like It's pretty detailed. Should I go deep on it?
Yeah, I would love
Okay.
to. We can kind of finish up with that.
Okay. So
Funny that we're ending on a hook. We should begin on the hook,
I
right?
know, right? So the hook, right? There's like different types of hook, right? There's the visual hook, which is like the text on the
Yeah.
screen.
Yeah.
There's a hook that you say that they don't see, but maybe they see it in the captions.
Sure.
There's a hook like I'm holding this pen, and that is like, but it maybe doesn't look like a pen, and it's like, what is that thing that creates? It's hooking the viewer, right? And that's
Mhm.
basically the whole idea is hook the viewer into what you're going to say.
Mhm.
And so if you're using like a text hook, for example, we're almost looking at copywriting in a way of what is the most effective like copywriting hook, right?
Yeah.
So you could say something, but like if it's showing up on captions, that's still a text hook. You're relying on that. And so how I look at it, some of the criteria is aiming for around like 8 words, because if you're thinking in like a scrolling motion, anything after 8, it's like, I don't want to be reading a book. And I
Yeah.
try to keep it to just 2 lines. I almost never go to 3 lines because 2 lines is just scannable. Has to be scannable, so very simple, everyday words, words that the audience would be interested in. And
Mhm.
then usually answering like a how, why, what, when, where, who as the start, or the blank. And usually just something that's interesting. In a perfect world, you would make the video, and then about a day later or something, you would then make the hook, because
Mm.
I don't know about you, but still to this day, the next day I'm like, I should have
Yeah.
done a different
Mhm.
hook.
Yep.
So timing is like a
And also,
constraint.
I get stuck sometimes, right? Like just
Yeah.
initially writing, I get stuck on the hook, and then, I'm sacrificing the time and getting creative with the rest of the copy, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like I get so fixated on is this good, and just constantly scribbling, and I'm not getting anywhere as a result of it. So to that point you were saying, yeah, do the whole thing, but save the hook till the end and see what feels right after you've got the meat of it done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes back to that like 4 C's of copywriting, which I always forget. Clear, and I should stop saying I always forget it because that probably instills the belief that I always forget.
Yes.
Clear, concise, compelling, and um,
Is it
credible.
clarity? Oh, credible.
Credible.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
I remembered them. Um, so those 4 C's I think are really important to go in the hook, but it all ties back to the video itself in a way, because if the topic of the video itself, like you can only make certain things so interesting
Yeah.
if it's not that like it's not that it's not interesting, maybe it's the way it's presented or something, because I guarantee I could make a video about, and this pen be way more interesting than what I've learned after 1400 short form videos, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that maybe ties back to the user behavior on social media, because they're coming from a place of numbing out and distraction interruption, you know?
Yeah.
So when they come across a video of a pen, mentally, that's a lot easier for them to grasp of like, whoa, look at that pen, it's yellow, versus I've made 1,400 videos, and the 4 C's of copywriting have taught me more than any, like that's like, whoa, okay, I got to be in the right headspace for this.
Mm, yeah.
So meeting your viewer where they're at is super important to the context of the hook, but also just the video as a whole. Like you could write great hooks, but like taking the whole video into context, yes, the hook is like the most important part, but really like everything's the most important part, because you could have the perfect hook and right after it leads to something that is maybe misleading because the video doesn't fulfill on that hook, or it's not actually that interesting to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So it is a piece, but it's not like the only piece, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I
That makes
think
sense.
the overarching like idea is the topic actually relevant and interesting to the viewer? And if it is, the hook is just going to make that so much more interesting, and it has the power to actually take that video and make it interesting to the viewer, because now they're hooked and they'll view it.
Mm-hmm.
But if that topic is not relevant and interesting to the viewer, even with a perfect hook, you're basically like trying to have a Toyota Corolla race a Ferrari at that point,
Mm.
because the Ferrari's going to win every time. So you better just like, you're better off just like, okay, this topic is interesting. And sometimes that's hard to hear for people that are like, but this is an interesting topic and the video is really important. And it is, maybe, but the format for that through short form video maybe isn't going to be landing as well as you want it to be because it's sandwiched in some guy eating 5 pizzas in a row
Hmm.
and somebody, drinking 8 2-liter Coke Zero bottles or something, and
Yeah.
you're in here giving these unique, important life advice tips that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really important to keep in mind is, and I think that's where a lot of us as creators fall short is finding and producing content that does find its audience where they are in that moment. That's a
Yeah.
real challenge.
Yeah, and it's not a challenge in a different environment. Like if you put on a podcast conference and people come to that podcast conference, you're not like every, 5 seconds like I need to change something in this room so people pay attention.
Hmm.
That's on short form video, like you got to keep them engaged because the environment is wanting to just keep their attention, their dopamine going. That's that environment, but it's not the environment elsewhere. So if you want that attention to go deeper on a certain thing, it's like just recognize it's you can get a sliver on there and it's a flawed way of communicating sometimes a really important idea, but that's the environment's fault, not your fault, not your message's fault, not your experience. It's not personal. But if you create another environment, which you could say, hey, if you like that, come join us over here where you can go way deeper on these things.
Yeah. Yeah. So then, all right. So first, let me just say, if you want more from Dylan, just look him up at dylanschmidt.com. And again, that's spelled Schmidt. Go check him out. He also has something called the Creator Club, which is his community. So if you're really into what Dylan has to say, maybe you want to consider joining that. And you can find that information over on his website at dylanschmidt.com. So check it out. And Dylan, one piece of advice for somebody new in the short form content world that can really help them get started with confidence.
Hmm. Yeah. Um,
Because, a lot of, from, I'm sure, from your own community, that people have this desire to get started and sometimes think, yeah, I can do that. And then when that red light comes on the camera, they freeze, they don't feel confident, they feel phony, an imposter, et
yeah.
cetera, et cetera. So yeah, so what's your advice to help them get through that?
Yeah. Well, the good news is nobody knows that you're not confident except you.
Mm-hmm.
And, I started my whole content game on an account that nobody I knew was following me because I didn't want, their voices, which were just made up in my head,
Mm-hmm.
coming over to this page.
Mm-hmm.
So you can be like you can have an alter ego that is not confident, right? If you want to like get really deep into it, you could look up internal family systems and see that we all have these parts inside of ourselves. So maybe a part of you isn't confident, but then there is a part of you that is confident. And I know that everybody knows that they have stuff that they do that they're confident in, right? It could
Mm-hmm.
be playing video games. It could be cooking a meal that you always cook. Like it's not true to say you're not confident across the board. You are
Right.
confident in certain areas. It is totally normal to be not confident in something that you're new at. But when it comes to the thing that you're talking about on camera, if you're like telling the truth and you're coming from a good place, just lean into that alter ego. Just be like, you know what? Maybe I'm not confident at the editing or it doesn't look like how I want it to look. That's normal. Like that's all completely normal. It gets better with time. And then pretty soon people will just be like, wow. But there are parts of the content creation process that you can be confident at. And, you know, to just throw a blanket, feeling over, I don't feel confident enough to do this is like shutting the whole thing down. Find the little things that you can be confident at. Like, I'm confident at this thing I'm talking about right now. That will pull you through versus focusing on the things that you're not confident at, because there's a million things you can choose to be not confident at. Don't magnify those. Magnify the thing that you're trying to do, which is share a message with somebody.
Mm. Yeah, I like that. I like that. So then what do you say though? Because what I'm hearing in my head, I'm thinking like one of them, and it's like, yeah, that's great. I'm confident in certain areas, but that's not why I'm making content. I'm not making content because I'm really good at cooking that one meal, right? So what do I do? How do I get over that?
Well, not the like not pulling in. I'm just using cooking as like an example of like you're not like some people will say like I'm just not a confident person, and it's like that's just a blanket term, but there's multiple parts of you, right? Like maybe a part of you is not confident, but in this one area, and another part of you is confident in another area. And when it comes to content creation, there are many parts of the process, and what you're going to be talking about in your content, be confident in the thing that you're talking about, you know? It's hard to be
Yeah.
like, this is how you do this if you aren't confident in that, you know?
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
you are like sharing something that you know to be true, which I have done that, and then people will call me out in the comments and be like, that's not true. And I'm like, yes, it is. I'm confident because I know what I'm saying is true because it's
Mhm.
personal. I'm talking about personal experiences. You're telling me my own personal experiences aren't true. I feel like, isn't that gaslighting?
Yeah.
Like
All
the
right.
comments are trying to gaslight me or something. So I'm confident in that because I'm speaking on something that I'm confident about, right? I might not be super confident in the editing. I might not be confident in the lighting or how I look, but I'm confident in what I'm sharing. And you know, at the end of the day, people will resonate with what you're sharing.
Yeah.
So I think that's the most important piece, and that's why I say like focus on. You don't have to be confident on. You don't have to be confident on like any. You know, there's a bunch
Yeah.
of things you don't have to be confident in. That's fine. You can still make it because if what you're talking about is congruent with, you know, your what you believe to be true, what you know is true, then that's all that's needed.
Yeah. There was something you just said too that I think is a little nugget that I want to pull out, which is sharing personal experiences, right? So, whenever if you're trying to break into short form content with a specific subject, topic, thing that you're kind of claiming this is my thing, then yeah, work on just sharing your personal experience, your stories, and not always just the successes, right? The failures too. And in fact, those are the ones that probably get more attention than the successes. So, and like to your point, how can you not be confident about just sharing your own experience?
Yeah,
Nobody can take that away from you. They can try, but they can't take it away from you. This is what you went through. This is your experience. This either delivered certain results or it didn't. And I believe you can speak confidently on that.
totally.
Yeah.
And you know, as a cautionary part of it too, you know, without opening yourself up for if you're vulnerable about it, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
sharing sometimes like failures, I'm always worried about people putting themselves in a position where they could like it could negatively impact them like mentally, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I always like tell people just like, you know, are you removed enough from this that say it gets no views and no comments or hurtful views and hurtful comments that you'll still be okay with it? And I was
Mm.
like, okay, then that's cool because um, you know, like I've said, I've shared truthful things and people will say that's not right. And if I was in like a wrong head place, I might be like, I need to prove to them that I'm right and they're wrong or something. And it's
Yeah.
like, I don't care about that because I'm not that attached to it. I know it's true. And um, yeah, but the personal experience is everything. And that's probably how humans have evolved so much, right? Through sharing our experiences and through stories and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, Dylan, thank you. Thank you for sharing a little bit more about you. Thank you for sharing about your processes. I think it's important to keep in mind that whole idea of really creating systems for ourselves if we want to start cranking out content on a more regular basis, whatever that frequency is for you. But I appreciate Do you have any book recommendations or any kind of recommendation if we want to start improving our own systems? I know you're a reader.
Yeah, Thinking in Systems is a good book. That one's a great place to start.
Okay.
I believe I have some book recommendations on my website, but
If you want to
Thinking
send
in
them, I can put them
Systems.
in the description too. I'll put them in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So send me some more of those recommendations. And again, thank you, Dylan. Do you want to stick around when I spin this wheel here?
Sure, let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's
I love a
see.
good wheel spin.
So we're only doing one spin, and if nobody's here, that's it. So in the past, I've spun again based on because you have to be present to win. But today, I'm just going to do it. If you're not here and your name gets on here, come back next week because we'll do this again next week. And make sure you got to register on LinkedIn and you got to be here during the Minvo Procast. And probably many of you know I do this at different times throughout the show. Today I waited till the end because we were just having too good of a conversation. So with that, you can see this, correct?
Yeah, this is
All
this
right.
is
But let's spin the wheel. And look, not a lot of names again this week. So this is a great opportunity for people to be a part of this and try to win. So it's Robert DeForge. Let me see if now is that you doing the sound?
that was me, yes.
Thank you. I love it. I love it. I need to get my applause queued up for next time. That's awesome. I love that. Let me see. Anybody? I don't think Robert has chimed in on the chat yet. And sometimes my chat doesn't refresh and I don't see. So, Robert, if you're here, go ahead and put it in the chat that you are. I'll go back and look and make sure. And if you are, you win. If you're not, sorry, you didn't win this time, but you can always come back next time and be a part of this. Get yourself a chance to win. And thank you, Dylan, for the extra sound effects. Always appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, Mark. This was a lot of fun to chat
You're
with you
welcome.
in depth about short form.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dylan. And we're back next week. And this time we're going to be interviewing Brooke Schnittman, who happens, speaking of ADHD, happens to be my ADHD coach. She's a business coach, an ADHD coach, etc. And she was one of those people that took a long time. She wanted to start a podcast. She wanted to do the content and build up a business through social media. And it took her a long time, especially with the podcast, to jump in. And we're going to learn about what got her to do it and what kind of successes she's seen and challenges she has seen since then. So until then, make it a great week, everybody. Take care. Let me just hit stop on everything. Cool. Thank you, Dylan.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. That was super fun.